Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee to order. I'm John Strand, your chair. Let's just run around the room and introduce ourselves, and we'll go around to the left.
Sure, just when I get my packet open. Mayor Mahoney.
Good afternoon, Brenda Derrig, City Engineer.
Dave Leaker, Fargo Park District.
Sean Paschke, XL Energy.
Bruce Grubbs, City Administrator.
Greta Gramig, Public Representative.
Becky Majerus, City of Fargo Facilities.
Mark Williams, Fargo Planning.
Casey Steele, Public Representative.
Shelley Byron, City of Fargo.
And thanks,
Blake
everybody.
Meisel, Fargo Public Schools.
I'm sorry, I stepped in and overspoke when you were saying, go back again, Blake?
Blake Meisel, Fargo Public Schools.
Okay. And
Also on Chair, to our presenters, yes. John and Brian, if you'd introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm John Flory with the Alliance Risk Group.
Brian True with Anawatts.
All right, and Bruce, do we have everybody?
Yes.
That's our roll call. Bruce, before we approve the agenda, would you just run us through what you have on the agenda?
Well, the agenda you can see in front of you, our major action I'd like to see this committee take today for the first time is recommend approval of our carbon dashboard proposal that I would then write up from this committee to the City Commission. So it would be an actionable item for the first time out of this committee to the City Commission. And really it's intended as a start to establish a carbon baseline for the city. So pretty excited about that.
Great, and for the sake of adding to the agenda, we'll just make a note that you'll be making some comments about these two.
Yes, actually, I've got some updates for the committee. I hope you can bear with me today.
Okay.
What you'll see in front of you is the reusable bags that I've got a little story about that that's great, and each of you gets to take one of those and take it home and use it.
Perfect. So let's approve the agenda with two updates from City Administrator Grubb. That'll be at the beginning. One will be the letter and one will be the bags. So is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? Okay, we'll go forward with the agenda. Bruce, let's go right to these two topics, especially because I could have let you just do it right then and there, but these two laid out items, and then we'll go forward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've heard,
I'm sorry, bear with me, I just got corrected. I need to have a motion to approve the minutes from our last January 5th meeting.
I move.
So there's a move, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, thank you, Shelley, for keeping me in line. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, now we go to you, Bruce, with these
Now,
two.
yeah, one of, and you have heard this before, but one of the initiatives the City of Fargo and other regional partners have been involved with is the FM Plastic Bag Task Force. It's been in existence for a few years. And recently, the task force had the idea of a project to procure 1,000 reusable bags. And the idea with those 1,000 is get those distributed out into the community, kind of working through the schools to get to parents. It seems like it's very effective when it comes to recycling those things. So the plan was to allow fifth graders from participating schools to come up with an artwork design for the bag. And that was to depict what they're learning in school about both recycling and those pesky plastic bags. And so the reusable bag that you all have to take home proudly displays the winning artwork, and the bag is yours to keep and use, Mayor. And so the remainder of the bag allotment after this, I'll be turning over to Jennifer Pickett, our recycling coordinator, to get distributed through the schools. So I would like to thank Darla Lewandowski. Obviously, she's the coordinator for the FM Plastic Bag Task Force, but also Blake with the school district, who helped contribute some funding to make this happen. But it's a reality. It sits there right in front of you. So, yeah. And then there's
this is fun, by the way.
Yeah.
This is really nice to see this type of a tangible result of a fun little effort. It reminds us that we've got work to do in the messaging we're doing. So
Yeah.
thanks, Bruce. It's good stuff.
Thank you, Chairman. And then I did pass out one other piece. You might recall at our last meeting, we got a presentation from Encota Power on something called Project Tundra. And Senator Pepcorn was in attendance at that meeting and appreciated hearing that presentation. And then a couple weeks later, the senator stopped by my office and asked that I distribute a memo from him to this committee and a publication that I have attached. It's called Great River News, and he found it really interesting and thought the makeup of this committee might find it interesting as well. So he was good enough to provide that to all of us. So that's for you to read. And Senator Pepcorn says thank you and enjoys the work we're doing. So that's encouraging too.
Any comments or follow-up on either of these for Bruce? Okay, Bruce, we can go into our major presentation proposal.
Yes,
Agenda item.
yes, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And John and Brian, you introduced yourselves. Thank you for being here. But this goes back to July 13th at our SRC meeting. We got an update on the Roberts Commons parking garage. It was actually a presentation on the smart energy ramp feature to that garage. And one of the things that was demonstrated for us was a carbon dashboard that had been created for the garage. And that's created to track emissions reductions through the use of renewable energy elements that have been incorporated into that garage. And so Mike Redlinger and I, after that, we found that carbon dashboard thing kind of interesting, liked what we saw, and then we followed up with John Flory and asked about the possibility of producing some sort of carbon dashboard for the city. We've always felt that it might be interesting to try to establish a carbon baseline for the city. You hear that talked about a lot, but we've never gone through the exercise of actually trying to do that. And so we followed up with John, asked if Alliance and Innowatts might be able to help us out with that. They indicated they could. The question is, where do you start? And so the team of Alliance Risk Group and Innowatts prepared a proposal for us that we'll go through tonight for the creation of a carbon dashboard or dashboards, as well as something called an infrastructure carbon reduction, sustainability, and resilience plan. And so that's just a plan looking at things you might want to consider doing additionally to what you're already doing to help aid in reducing carbon emissions. And so John and Brian are with us today. Thank you both again for agreeing to appear virtually today. If this committee, as I mentioned, likes this idea, I would like to see us take a roll call vote. I would prepare a formal report of action coming out of this committee to the City Commission, and then have the City Commission support the SRC's recommendation. We'd get started on this. So with that, John, Brian, was that clunky enough introduction for you? Who gets to drive from here?
That was perfect, Bruce. This is Brian True. I will take the first few slides, and then John and I will certainly tag team throughout the remainder of the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, and the rest of the committee. Really appreciate your time today. As I think Bruce mentioned, this partnership was born out of the Smart Clean Energy project that was done at Robert Commons Garage. And we are very excited about the potential of obviously extending that partnership and a lot of the lessons learned and the capabilities that we brought to bear for that to the benefit of the city beyond ROCO, and looking at other sites and how we can help support developing a carbon dashboard and the sustainability and resiliency plan for the city. I will say, kudos to Bruce and Mike and the rest of the city. You guys are on the leading edge in terms of your vision with regards to carbon. Certainly the initiatives that are going on statewide are helping to contribute to that. But I just want to compliment you in terms of the vision that you have around being able to measure carbon, understand the steps you can take to reduce it, and ultimately use it as a way of helping to build help build the benefits across the city, attract people, and all the great things that will inevitably come from it. If we can jump into just one last thing, I apologize, and for the sake of introductions, I am with Innowatts. I'm the vice president of delivery and implementation. It is my team that has been supporting the Robert Commons garage project, and my team will continue to be involved with this project. If the committee decides to move forward, so certainly look forward to building upon that relationship. As we look at the agenda, what we plan to do today is just give you a little bit more background, talk about the project deliverables so you can understand exactly what you're going to get with regards to the dashboard, the dashboards, the infrastructure, carbon reduction and sustainability and resiliency plan, and then how that can all come together in terms of using the dashboard to understand current state, how that could be leveraged in the context of making other smart, clean energy investments, and then how we create a flywheel of understanding current state, defining a plan to drive further carbon reduction, sustainability, and resiliency, and how that becomes a flywheel for you guys for just extending this model across the city. We'll talk about the schedule as we envision it. We'll then discuss a few funding and structure options for how we could proceed for you to consider, and then discuss next steps. Hopefully that agenda meets the mark. Certainly as we go throughout the course of today's discussion, please feel free to stop and ask us questions at any point throughout. Moving into the background, a lot of this is, I would say, well known to this committee, but certainly the carbon neutrality goal as set by the governor is ambitious and one of the driving forces behind the ROCO project and what we're presenting here today. Certainly enhancing sustainability and resiliency of infrastructure, both at a state and federal level, is receiving funding. We're certainly seeing what we refer to as the environmental sustainability and government's funding in the private equity space increasing, and you guys are, I believe, at the best intersection, if you will, between state and municipality-driven initiatives, and where how you can demonstrate and provide leadership across the rest of the state. As I mentioned, we worked very closely together as a part of the Robert Commons project. Certainly know Mike and Bruce and the rest of the folks at the city of Fargo well based on that experience, and we look forward to leveraging those same relationships and model going forward. Certainly the steps that the city has taken on a number of sustainability and resiliency initiatives has resulted in a positive reduction in carbon, and the dashboards, the capabilities, the plan that we're going to outline here for you guys today is really all intended to help you continue down that path. With that, I would open it up to John, if you have any other background that you'd like to provide before we go ahead and jump into the dashboards and the resiliency plan.
Thank you very much, Brian.
We hear you.
Have I muted? Have I unmuted myself?
We hear you, John.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I just want to make sure. All right, and I have with me, I think, Randy Roy. Is it? Randy?
Yes, I'm here, John.
Okay, super. Randy is an Alliance associate who will be having the most dirt under the fingernails, so to speak, in moving this project forward. So, we want to start by giving an indication of what the dashboard would look like, and then we'll talk more about what the plan would be behind it. But they both start from the same fundamental cornerstones. So at a high level, we see a summary dashboard that will show the pounds per month and maybe give some other indicative number that people can relate to, such as the miles of auto driving that would offset, and also an indication what the percent is reduction from the baseline and what savings in operating costs. We will, early on in the project, sit down with the city to finalize exactly what they want to have included. We've done an initial review with the city, and we know we're standing in the same ballpark together. And we'll have one of our early sessions. We'll finalize this. This initial dashboard will include all the city sites that are referenced in the Sustainability Resiliency Committee white paper. So it's the landfill, City Hall, main library, the ROCO parking, central garage, street lights, traffic lights, water storage, water treatment, wastewater treatment, and the sanitary lifts. And then what people would be able to do is, you can see where it says city sites for carbon reduction, landfill, City Hall, ROCO parking, et cetera. That if someone wanted to, after they've seen the summary page, they could go and click on which of those individual sites that they might want to look into more deeply. And then for those individual sites, we would have a table, what the baseline is, what the current usage for carbon is, and what the delta or impact is. And then off to the side, it would list the types of measures that have been taken at that site. So here's the Roberts Commons or ROCO project, and the 5 major actions there have been the installation of solar, smart lighting, EV charging, battery storage, and intelligent demand control. Looks like there's about a 40% carbon impact to date from that process, and O&M savings of around $450 a month. The main way we will be generating these dashboards going forward is we'll get input data, most of which will be utility bill information, such as from Excel. We'll use that then to create a detailed dashboard for each site. An alliance will be involved in the compilation of the input data and development of the detailed dashboards. And then that will lead to a summary dashboard, both for the individual site as well as summary for all the city facilities. The main responsibilities of the cities will be initially in helping us determine what the sources of the input data will be, as well as some of the sites on the configuration of the dashboard, and then monthly to make sure, like, get the Excel energy utility bills appropriate for those sites. And then as appropriate, if you have any changes planned for equipment or any other issues you think could materially affect the energy emissions, then the city would let us know. Drilling down one level of detail further, as we said, the net energy is the basic unit that we'd have for each month, start on a monthly basis. We are, at the ROCO project, we're getting hourly information. We'll explore the possibility of doing that for other sites. But at least, so that's the starting point and the indication there. The detailed dashboard would look for whatever the individual measures are, such as lighting, solar, battery storage, et cetera, and what the ramifications for the energy and carbon dioxide impact are, both from a baseline perspective and from what the impacts are. So you can see how this then ties back to the table we showed earlier for the example, the ROCO project, and producing that operating dashboard. Any comments or questions on this before I go forward? Okay. Here's an example of the types of calculations that would be behind the detailed dashboard. So, for example, for the ROCO complex, before we started that project, there was about 18,000 kilowatt hours a month that would be used. The power plant mix in the northern North Dakota area for the Mid-Continent is in the system operator, the power grid operator, is about 1.25 pounds per kilowatt hour. So you multiply those together, you can see what the carbon is pounds per month for the complex. The solar photovoltaic reduces about 2,700 kilowatt hours in a month on average. applying the carbon intensity, and you get a reduction of 3,330 pounds, which is about a 15% reduction. The EV charging, currently, it was, when we put this together, it was like 1.75% of the total hours of a month, which led to 900 kilowatt hours of increased electricity use. And so, again, at 1.25 pounds per kilowatt hour, that led to it. It led to an increase of 1,132 pounds of carbon dioxide for the month. However, at 3 miles per kilowatt hour, that kilowatt hour usage would imply 2,718 miles of EV charging would offset 2,718 miles of car driving, and indicative number of 0.81 pounds of carbon dioxide per mile. That would be offsetting 2,200 pounds of carbon dioxide in a month. So there'll be a net savings in carbon dioxide, even though there's an increase in the kilowatt hours for the month. Net savings at the current usage rate of EV charging stations is about 5%. Another major item is the smart lighting controls, and about a 3,600 kilowatt hours per month, which is 4,500 pounds per day. Add all these up, and you of these carbon savings, get a net savings of 8,900, which gives a carbon footprint of 13,200. And so we essentially have a savings of 40%. So the red numbers you see on this detailed calculation will roll up into whatever that summary dashboard is for the chart, and that you saw previously. Any questions on that? And this is indicative of the type of dashboard that would be created for the other individual sites. Okay. Another benefit I want to call to your attention is the economic development benefit. And what surprised me a little bit when I first talked to the Renewable Energy Committee of North Dakota was they were as much interested in economic development benefit as an impact on renewable energy. So we included some analysis on that. And Kilbourne Group was a major co-sponsor of the project. And what they found was that the people in the Roco and Dillard complex, which are relatively, as you guys know better than me, are relatively close to the Roco parking garage. And they said that 85% of their new residents came from out of state, and that those 133 people work for 56 different Fargo businesses. So, and the intriguing thing is that they said that a lot of these people who are around average age of 31 really thought that the smart clean energy package at Roco was impressive in terms of the image of Fargo and what it was doing to be on the cutting edge. And so it really helped attract the workforce. And that the typical salary of these people at $65,000, multiply the 133, and you get a direct benefit of $8 million and an economic multiplier on that. And you're talking about $12 million of regional economic benefit. In many places, in many states, of course, it's the business comes first to give jobs to the people there. And North Dakota's been blessed enough that you've got the business there, and it's the workforce that's often the constraint. So it is truly an appropriate thing to say that enhancing the city's image through projects like this to help attract the workforce in can help the state grow its gross domestic product. Comments or questions? Okay. That's just on a side note, but I thought it was a very relevant side note. So on the so we've talked about the dashboards. Now we're going to roll over to talk more about developing the plan, the infrastructure, carbon reduction, sustainability, and resiliency plan. It's a little bit awkward, but given how there's so much talk about infrastructure these days, we thought it would help from a funding perspective to have that in there, as well as carbon reduction. And you guys, of course, as the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee, have the longer term focus. A lot of the work on this is very similar to the development of the dashboard in terms of there's been input data, sort of some detailed calcs, and then a summary plan. The main difference is we'll be starting with the baseline data, and then we will actually be doing more detailed analysis upon whatever new measures can be identified, and then what the impacts of those measures would be, particularly in terms of the net energy and carbon dioxide use and any potential resiliency impacts. And so then the plan for each site would be a set of measures, the carbon dioxide total by site impacts, and then also we throw in estimates of the operating cost savings, initial costs, and resiliency impacts. The city will help us in providing the initial information up front, and the plan, what the plan goals should be, intended use, make sure we have an accurate understanding of the current equipment stock, what measures are already in place at that facility that could affect the energy and emissions use, such as typical operating schedules. And then also, as we put drafts of the plan together, the city would, staff would provide feedback to us. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. So the plan, we see two versions of this. First, for 2 to 3 facilities that we will jointly select with the city. You see a semi-detailed plan, somewhat at the level of which the ROCO project was done in terms of specific measures and estimate of benefits. And then we see a higher level plan across all city facilities, and the main purpose of that is to help, I should say, help you all in looking at what opportunities are, as well then as following behind that funding from the state feds as the infrastructure dollars flow through the system. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. The schedule, after we get started during the first month, we'll be working with the city, as I said before, to finalize the specs and what the data sources are. By the second month, we intend for the dashboards to have the prototypical plans in place and then have them operational within 3 months. And then the dashboard will continue in operation. The plans for the 2 to 3 sites, we see getting that started in the first month as part of the overall data collection. We wanted to allow a little extra time for that because of the level of detail, and also thought it might be more important to be prepared for whatever funding opportunities we have. So we're pushing the citywide plan ahead of the individual sites. But this is something that can be discussed based upon how events seem to be unfolding as we work with the city. Questions on the schedule? Okay. The fees, it's an initial payment up front of $114,000, $104,000 for the dashboard and plan. We have a budget of $10,000 for travel. And then after 12 months, after June 1st, 2023, there'll be a monthly payment of about $5,000, $3,000 incrementally for the dashboard as it's been enhanced. Plus, there's already a contract in place with Innowatts that the city has for providing the base dashboard for ROCO, and so we're going to be able to build a lot onto that existing base contract for these other dozens of sites. So, okay. So I think the next steps, as Bruce can elaborate, you all answer any questions and take any action you want. We can stay on or drop off as appropriate. And then I guess Bruce would go before the Finance Commission and the City Commission. And then we would start probably mid-April or something like that.
Thank you, John. I have some follow-up thoughts on this, Mr. Chair, if you're ready.
Absolutely.
So it always seems like, how do you pay for things, which is an interesting thought. That first year to start creating the dashboards and the IC RSR plan, $114,000, and then there is an ongoing, not unlike a maintenance fee that we have for a lot of software. But anyway, $114,000, where would that come from? And I was speaking with Terry Ludlam about this topic because there are some synergies between our landfill gas collection, its carbon capture and destruction. We're happening to use it as fuel. But anyway, we expanded our gas collection well field last fall. And at the end of that project, it came in $200,000 under budget. And since there's such a close synergy with our carbon destruction there and this effort, they were good enough to offer. They're really excited about this as well. So that would be the way that I would propose we pay for this.
You know, I've got the dumbest question in the world. What would this look like on the website, or on, I'm just trying to visualize the dashboard, where it'll be, what it'll look like, how the user will access it, what they'll see?
Yeah, and John, I should have probably taken you back to when you gave us the presentation on the ROCO ramp. We actually looked at those online dashboards. They kind of look like a speedometer or something like that in my simple mind, you know, but love those things.
So it'll be on every aspect of our city sites, or just the sites that they go to, like City Hall or landfill, or will it be everywhere?
Well, I think we'd put a link right up front. We'll start out with 3 locations, and then as we get those dashboards developed for those locations, we'll link it right on our opening page so that people can go look at that and have a progression of where we plan to go from here and keep that interactive and dynamic. That's the way I see it.
Let's go around the table. Who has input or questions or feedback?
Just so I can understand this a little bit more, I'm slow on the uptake after a 3-week-long battle with COVID, but so this is meant for the public to get information about what the city is doing? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So people visit the websites and they're able to see these dashboards and understand what the city is doing to address these problems.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure because
Good
it
question.
wasn't quite clear what the goal was.
I would like to add that the information behind the summary dashboard will be usable for the city well to monitor what's going on and help us plan.
I think you were breaking up a little bit, John. I'm not a lip reader, but I'm gonna try and interpret what you just said. Is the summary dashboard is what we put out for the public. The data dashboards behind the scene we'd maintain internally. So
I'm going to continue with my learning process here. If we have this dashboard, like Greta says, for the public to see, of course, there's an educational component to it, but help me grasp what will the result be that we'll see? Will this contribute to levels of efficiencies going into the future, that we will, in fact, down the road have savings that will come from our awareness? And I'm just trying to see that bigger picture.
All of that. And the idea with establishing the baseline for pick a building, any building, City Hall, is then this building was built with a lot of efficient features. It's relatively new, but pick a different building. Once we establish the existing baseline, then we work with Becky to look at, is it lighting? Is it heating and cooling? Is it where can we become more efficient, save energy, reduce carbon emissions, hopefully savings in the long run. That's oftentimes what we find.
So Bruce, as I hear it, that data will drive our actions ongoing.
Correct.
So Becky and our facilities will look at them and we'll see signals and information that will guide us to being more proactive.
Yes.
And is that, does anybody else do this? Is there any locally or besides ROCO?
I'm not aware nationally. John, you may.
Yeah, there's a number of cities across the country that are in the process of putting together carbon reduction plans.
And what's the best bang for the buck they get out of it? How do the communities respond or receive this going, you know, I'm just curious how they react.
Most communities respond very positively. Where they do this, there's just enough background insights or conversations on climate change that most people respond positively. The flip side, in North Dakota, I would tend to emphasize how North Dakota's all the above strategy in energy is helping, even though we're using electricity that has a significant coal component to it, that when added to the wind, the two of them together can reduce carbon footprint. And so I think that there's some North Dakota specific benefits that can be mentioned. And was I understandable? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, thanks, John. And as an engineer trade, learned early on, if you can measure it, then you can track it and you can change something. But until you have a feel for where you are, I think it really helps demonstrate success, progress, if you can measure something.
Speaking of measuring something, I wonder if there'd be a way to incorporate the goal, the end goal, carbon neutrality by 2030, so that we could see with all these initiatives how far we've come toward meeting that goal.
Certainly could do that.
That's a good point, Greta. So we can gauge where we are relative to where we're aiming.
Yeah, kind of like these online fundraising efforts where they have the little thermometer and they show how far they have come toward reaching their goal.
Bruce and Brian and John, is there any opportunity here for staff or departments or people to further make suggestions or tips or ideas, or is this just is it our department? Who will be the hands-on folks? Or can somebody in a building share a...
Yeah, I mean, certainly facilities would be involved, our solid waste utility. The biggest carbon bang for the buck we have is at the landfill, that we capture all of that methane gas. And so I see it being the staff that we have that participate on the SRC. That would include engineering, street department, planning, facilities, myself.
Yes, and we have provided formally for input from the relevant city staff up front as we're finalizing what the dashboards look like and how the calculations are done.
Yeah, I would add that, you know, at its core, what we are managing is energy demand and usage, coupled with reductions in demand as driven by smart, clean energy investments. And so the question was, what else could the city do, or how could the city further engage in this project? And the immediate thought is that each building will have its load shape, and it's that load shape that ultimately helps us in aggregate understand what the total carbon that's generated. But based on the data we would get from Xcel Energy, based on the data that we'd get from the city or the city's partners that have that are supporting the solar or the batteries or whatever the DER assets are, there could be other trends or other insights that you might find that if as the city works with the data, looks at the information, they could identify other insights in terms of how temperature or heating or cooling is being used in these facilities that could further help you with your energy efficiencies, in addition to highlighting where you are with regards to carbon emissions and how investments through the resiliency plan could help you further reduce your carbon emissions, all working towards the net zero or carbon neutrality objective by 2030.
This is Blake from Fargo Public Schools. I just have one question. How often is this information updated on the dashboard? The reason why I ask is because the school kind of did something similar on a very small scale. With energy and electricity, we were trying to make it a competition between schools to see who could reduce the amount of electricity being used every day. The problem is the information was updated maybe once a week, so people lost interest in it. So how often is the information updated? Is it real time, or is it updated once a week, every other day, or how does that work?
Initially, it'll be once a month, just because we're going to have data from different sources. And some of the facilities will only have the monthly billing data from like Xcel Energy or Cass County Cooperative. So having said that, we do have the infrastructure, and Interlots can support it, of getting near real-time electricity usage data and calculating the emissions behind that. And it could change more frequently. And then you think that would be helpful. That's something that potentially could be added. But right now we're trying to get started with low-hanging fruit to get the basic carbon reduction and helping the planning to achieve that and give the residents some indication. But the beauty of the Interlots solution is that it does allow you to move towards real time as the metering technology would be installed.
Yeah, we can enable up to as low a frequency of updates as daily. Most of our use cases that we support today are supported by that. And certainly as we evolve, if daily updates of dashboards or reports or other information is valuable and can be enabled, I know certainly Xcel Energy can deliver information with that frequency, in addition to the other, I'll say, third-party DER device providers. As long as we can consume the data at that frequency and receive it, then we can certainly present it and make it available as part of either the dashboard or other ad hoc needs that the city might have.
Thank you.
Who else has any questions or feedback? One of the thoughts that's occurring to me is there are folks out there that say, well, Fargo needs to declare a climate emergency. And I hear things like that. I go, okay, but what's that mean? My nature is to let's find actionable, tractionable items we can actually do that show our intention, rather than just put out a message that we're concerned about the climate. Bruce, is your sense, speaking of the tool this will give the city, how do you see this looking down the road and the value that it would provide in that light?
Well, I think it allows us to start out by measuring on 3 facilities and demonstrating a success, hopefully on 3 facilities, and it will start to gain momentum. Hopefully we can show there's an economic upside to that as well, but certainly from an emissions standpoint there will be. And I'm just excited to get started because we can't grow any further unless we take that first step. And I see this as the first really exciting step. And I think Casey tried to jump in there a moment ago.
Yeah, I had a question about the graphics end of it from the public through the website. Is there a way to compare and see that progress, or is this just an active meter that's just kind of showing you where we currently are? So if we looked at it, can we see where that facility was a month ago, 2 months ago, that kind of thing?
Certainly, time series analysis is enabled through the InnoWatts platform, and I think the intent is, I think Bruce said it well, is in this to establish a baseline of carbon emissions associated with the sites that we're going to measure. The plan, the resiliency plan, will then define a set of steps that can be taken, clean energy investments, energy efficiency recommendations to reduce energy demand or reduce the amount of carbon. And so you can actually see over time how the steps you've taken as a part of your resiliency plan have had a net positive impact on carbon reduction.
Being as the governor has declared North Dakota's desire or goal to be carbon neutral by, I think, 2030, are there state fundings or is there state support for us to take this further? Like, of course, we're talking Fargo, but we're talking a few facilities we could grow it. But eventually we could bring the school district in, we could bring the park district in, we could bring broader community partners in. Is there a relationship with the state where they're fueling this and greasing the skids?
We believe there is, both at the state and federal level. That's the idea behind leading the title as an infrastructure, because as you know, the new infrastructure plan, we have a lot of opportunities for funding to help us along the way here. And I think doing some of this work really positions us well to pursue that.
Anybody else? Casey?
Yes. For the potential 3 sites that would be picked, is it better to start with one that has the most room for improvement? Or are we looking, like a City Hall being so already on the up and up, do we benefit from that?
Thank you, Casey. I would agree with that. That this one's built a little more modern. We've already got automatic on-off switches, and so I think we would rethink that. Get an older site that we can do things with. So, thank you.
Good feedback. Anything else? Questions, comments, follow-up before we go to acting on this? Bruce, remind us the process we need to undertake at this committee and then where we'll go from here, if you would.
I have a suggested motion.
Okay.
At the end of my memo, page 2, and generally somebody on the committee, voting member, would make a motion. There would be a second. There would be a roll call vote taken. And this would go from this committee as a recommendation to the City Commission under an actual report of action.
Okay.
Commissioner Strand, I think I overstepped my bounds on that second motion because I'm not a voting member. So before you go through the roll call, I want to make sure.
We're just going to take it out of your wages. We're not stressing about that. Okay. Any other feedback? And we have a suggested motion. Is there anybody at the table who would like to advance that motion?
I'd make that motion.
Brenda, Derek, is there a second?
I will second it.
Brenda Gramick, second. Any questions, comments, feedback?
Thank you for the motion and the second. I thought I was going to have to do it all here for a moment.
So Bruce, you're pretty excited about this.
Yeah. We've been talking about carbon baseline before carbon was cool, back in the late 90s.
And for people out there in the audience listening and learning, you know, Bruce Grubb's our city administrator. He used to be director of public works. So this is your lane for almost forever?
Yeah, I was, thank you for the public works comment. I was actually enterprise director. And what does that mean? It didn't captain a spaceship. It meant the public utilities, water, wastewater, and solid waste. So the landfill is where all of this renewable energy stuff started back in the 90s, believe it or not.
Okay, any other discussion before we go to a vote, Mayor?
John, are you thinking he'd be like Scotty on the Enterprise? Is that what you're thinking? Or?
He already is. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion. Shelley, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Oh, certainly. Brenda Derrick,
Aye.
Greta Gaming,
Aye.
John Strand,
Yes.
Tim Mahoney,
Yeah.
Bruce Grubb,
Aye.
Mark Williams,
Aye.
Becky Majerus,
Aye.
Casey Steele.
Aye.
That's all.
Our first action's unanimous, Mr. Chairman. Nice meeting.
Well, we're getting some traction, and we're getting an action going forward. Mayor, did you have something you were going to?
Well, I'm just curious, when we get all this data back, will it be Becky's responsibility to tell us what to do then? Is who when this is all done, is it something that our team will come back with recommendations from their recommendations? Would it come back to this committee, or would it go to the commission?
I recommend that we allow the staff at the table to pick the 3 sites. My only insisting is I want the city landfill in there because that's half of my career, so.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, we have our first major action going forward. I don't see anybody in the public. I don't know that anybody has signed up to have a public comment. Is anybody aware of anybody online or anything? Do our folks online have anything else to contribute while we're still convened?
Thank you very much for your vote of confidence.
Well, you know,
Nothing more to contribute, Ed. Thank you for your vote of confidence. I really admire the vision that Bruce has and the rest of you have in terms of how to be able to help the citizens of Fargo understand the net benefit of the investments you guys are making and your concern on carbon reduction.
you know, and I'm learning. I think my first entree into understanding a little bit was when Casey presented to us, and several months ago, or maybe even a year ago. But there's so much that's unfolding, and there's a bigger conversation. North Dakota has such a major role in the energy sector, with the role we have with oil and with gas and with coal. And then with the governor's notion or goal to have us be carbon neutral, it's just opened up a flurry of activity. And there's debates on every element of this, but what I'm proud of is that Fargo is taking a lead in this conversation that will play into the state's role. And that Fargo is stepping up and showing this vision and this leadership and chiming in with the importance of having these conversations about climate. It's just critical right now. So Bruce, thank you for bringing this forward and for bringing these team players forward and for an action that over time we'll look back on it and go, that was just a great initial step. Besides things like this.
Thank you. And I just wanted Blake, who's appearing virtually, we will keep your bag in a safe place and we'll get it to you the next time we meet up.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Anything else for the good of the order? Great meeting, great action. We'll watch for this. Bruce, when this comes to the city commission, maybe we can invite our committee members to attend and be there in the audience that night. So if you get a chance to see it being acted on, and we can introduce you to the full commission. Okay. On that note, thank you, Bruce. We stand adjourned. Thanks everybody for showing up. Greta, I'm glad you recuperated and back at it.
I'm not brain dead.
Well, we still have a lot to work with what you deliver. So thank you. We are adjourned at that. Thank you.